Hi, I'm Nikki Jovikic from Lookup Strata. This conversation is occurring during the March 2022 weather event on the East Coast, resulting in widespread flooding and water damage. Our thoughts are with everyone affected by the recent weather event and flooding. Please stay safe. I'm speaking quickly with David Nixon from Stormwater Sydney about addressing flooding and water issues in strata properties. We thank David for taking the time to speak to us today about what damage he's currently seeing in strata buildings around Sydney and what residents and committee members can do now as the rain is still falling and is forecast to continue to fall over the next few days. If you see water damage or flooding occurring in your building, what should you do? And we also speak briefly about what to do when the sun comes out again, preventative measures you can take and how to mitigate damage from floods in future events. Well, thanks for taking the time to have a chat with me this morning, David. It's great. It's actually at the moment, it's the 4th of March. So we're kind of right in the middle of everything happening over there in Sydney. You mentioned to me it's still actually raining there at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, so what are you seeing from different buildings? You're getting lots of calls in, I believe, from around Sydney, and what's happening out there?
So we're getting lots of calls in from stratas, from facilities, and even from residential properties at the moment. We've had some excessive rain. So anything that hasn't been maintained over the last period of time is tending to fail at the moment. But even systems that have been in place are actually starting to fail because there's just so much water that's been coming down. A couple of our areas have actually got more than half the annual rainfall within one day. And our systems actually aren't designed for that. And that's probably a good point to make, is that a well-maintained stormwater and water systems, they're only to cater for so much water. And you do actually have water above that, which is actually what is happening at the moment. So it's important to actually maintain that any of the devices and the systems you've got, but it's also important that you don't block surcharge paths, that you actually think about, okay, if things overflow, where is the water going to go?
Okay, that's great. So what are you seeing? Like, what sort of damage is happening out there? You're getting flooding basements. What else is happening over in the building?
So we're getting flooding basements. We're getting flooding carpets. There's a lot of drains that haven't been cleared, and therefore, with the build-up, it's running back into the building. So entering actually into apartments. So also a lot of flooding in the basements. Some of the roofing systems that have actually haven't been maintained or have actually been at the end of their life are actually now failing. And then you're also actually getting a lot of pipes that are actually being blocked. Because what happens in a storm event, if there's a lot of material or in there, tree roots or something, a lot of excess water will tend to actually block those, and then they'll actually fail completely. So there's a lot of complete failures. Some things you can actually fix immediately. You can get a plumber out to actually fix a drain, but then you actually need to look at after the event and say, okay, is there something we can actually do to prevent this actually in the longer term? And that's probably where we go and focus a lot more than the emergency repair ourselves.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a little while, what people can do as preventative measures for the next event that happens. But just now, if you're a lot owner or a committee member and you're walking around your building, or you actually see this happening in your building, and there's water damage being caused at the moment, or there's a flood situation occurring, what should you do at this point in time while the rain's still falling and you're still in the middle of the event? What happens now?
So there's two things you want to do at the moment. Is one, to stop any further damage, and two is to try to keep a record of actually what's occurred, so that we can actually have a good idea happening later. So on the first thing, if there's drains that are surcharging, a plumber or ourselves or a lot of other people can actually clean those. And usually you do that from jetting. So you're basically forcing water through a pipe, you're clearing the roots out, you're clearing the other material out, and that's quite basic. And we have a lot of failures between units and the road and the streets for many reasons as well. The other thing that people can actually do, especially if you've got basements, is actually walk around the basement. People don't like to look at drains. They love putting things on top of them. So you'll find most of your units, every place you've actually got a grate or drain, someone will put a pot plant on top of it. Now, that might look good, but actually when storm events are occurring, that is actually something that you should actually go and make sure that you're not actually doing that. A lot of people in basements, there'll actually be edge drains around the basement areas. and a lot of people will find that a great spot to put all their storage. So yeah, and that's something that people should. So it's a good time to have a walk around your building, and just say, okay, if the rain does fall, where is it going to go? Are we actually stopping things from actually being maintained? It's probably a little bit late to be doing maintenance on things when the rain is falling, but you need to think about that moving forward. I mentioned earlier about taking photos and videos. Quite often we'll get a phone call saying, oh, it's flooding, what can you do? There mightn't be much we can do immediately. We may have to pump things out. We may be able to clear drains. But what's really important is that we actually make sure that it doesn't happen next time. So it's invaluable. We can go and actually have a look, but quite often you're only guessing actually what's occurred. It's invaluable to actually have photographs, videos, and everything else of the building from different points of view, where it's coming from, where it's going, where it's blocking up, because that allows us actually to do some investigation and actually give a solution to the property owners.
Okay, that's really great. That's some great points there. And so then moving forward to make sure, or to I mean, like you were saying, sometimes the amount of water that's coming down, you really can't do anything about it, no matter how well you've got things set up. But if you can sort of take some steps to try and mitigate the damage from future events. So some of the things you've mentioned are having a walk around the building, making sure all the drains are clear and there's no obstructions on the drains when you're coming up to these kind of events. And what else should people be doing before or from as soon as everything dries out and they get back to a sort of a dry day and they can look forward? What should they be doing ready for the next event coming along?
So there's probably two main things you need to think about. Is about one, maintaining any of the devices in your property, and I'm talking about your pipes, your drains, your grates, your pump stations, your detention basins, your OSDs, car washers, and a lot of our buildings have all these type of devices. And they're no different to your car. They need to be maintained on a regular basis. We have contracts with a lot of people where we actually go and inspect them on a 6 monthly basis. And on the 12 monthly basis, you tend to do a more deep clean, remove all the, and it's quite important that after a major storm event, which they usually say is over 50 mils, and we've had 500 mil plus, is to go and actually have a look and make sure they're actually maintained and working. Especially if you've got detention basins, OSDs, you'll find that actually the filter's blocked up, the grates are blocked up, so that's important. And if you don't actually have a maintenance agreement with somebody, it's an important thing to actually put on your list and do. The second thing is to actually have a look around the building. There's been a lot of older basements that actually don't have adequate drainage in the underneath. A lot when they're actually underground, you actually have water coming in at a fairly constant rate. And there are things we can actually do. They can be quite expensive, but it might be important that you look at your sinking fund and you actually put some of the capital costs in on some of these. Quite often you'll be getting drainage in from a neighbour, and you can actually put subsoil drainage, egg pipes, etc., at your boundary, at your building, so that you're actually preventing the water going in. So it's important that if we are having flooding issues and water is coming in the building, that we can actually go and actually have a look and say, okay, what can we do to divert it? Is it within the cost or the reach of the building to actually be able to afford that and to do that? And at some stage, insurance companies will be starting to say, okay, you're flooded for the second time. What have you done to prevent it? And that's a question we really, none of us want to have with our insurance company, but I'm sure they'll start having it with us.
Yes, okay. And we also spoke about things like switchboards being down in basements as well. You can look at maybe moving a switchboard up so that you're not presented with an event where the building has to be evacuated because you've got no power.
Yeah, there's so some things are actually governed by local statute. So all your emergency powers, the same as your smoke detectors, your fire extinguishers, all those, there are statutes with, and so people do tend to regularly inspect those. Switchboards, it was always cheaper to put something in the basement than actually up on the third or fourth floor. Sometimes we regret that. It can be very expensive to move some of those things, but there are other solutions that are possible, even in flood areas. And I'm talking, you say Sydney, out near Penrith, or in Brisbane. There are actually some devices that can stop water from coming into driveways. There's raisable barriers. So there are quite a few devices out there, and they're heavily, a lot of this technology has come out of Europe, where they actually do have quite regular massive floods. So you can get storm gates and things like that. So you do stop your basements from being completely flooded, actually, in an event. And if you're in some of the flood-prone areas, it's probably definitely worth having a look at.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Do you have any other advice you can pass on to our listeners at this point?
All I would suggest to everyone at the moment is stay safe, stay out of the floodwaters, and take lots of photos, because we can always actually go back and work out what has happened afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Great advice.
Okay.